Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Writing 201-095 WB. Um, and today we're going to be talking about um, a couple of poems that I assigned for you to look at today. And, you know, uh, normally, of course, I would, if we were not in the middle of a pandemic and we were meeting, Um, I shouldn't say things like that because I might want to reuse these videos later on when it's not a pandemic, and then the students will be like, "What is he talking about?" Uh, so I should avoid topical references. That's one thing they teach you in the online instructor's handbook. Anyway, but in a face to face class, we'd spend an entire period just sort of introducing the genre of poetry, what we mean when we call something poetry. And there'll be a bit of a philosophical component to that, what makes something a poem, etc. We're I'm going to try to sort of trim some of the fat and keep this video, to a reasonable length, as I usually try to do. So, like I said before, nobody will concentrate on an 80-minute video. So I try to keep it 20 minutes, something in that range, maybe a little longer. But suffice it to say, if you had a chance to read the chapter in the Norton from the Norton introduction on poetry, you certainly got a sense of poetry is a rhythmic kind of literature, right? What makes poetry? Oh, my shirt collar's a little screwed up here. Always check your shirt collar before you start the video. I'm not going to start over because I just don't feel like it. I'll just press on. Um, uh, a poem is different than a story or work of fiction in the way it is organized and arranged, right? When you think of a poem, you think of something that's written in lines as opposed to filling up a page. And it's really the sort of primary thing that makes poetry distinct from fiction or short stories or novels, right? Prose writing. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. And depending on the kind of poetry you're reading, some poems have very strict, formal kinds of technical rules that they follow that are representative of the era in which they were written. And of course, such a thing is true of Shakespeare's Sonnet 55, which is, sorry, ignore this. We're not even up to Essay 1 revisions yet. I don't know. Shakespeare's Sonnet 55, which obviously was written a long time ago. Let me click and open it up here. And which is written in a way that is sort of unfamiliar to the way we're used to writing now, even if we write poetry. If you've ever studied any Shakespeare before, for instance, you maybe have heard the term iambic pentameter. Where's my notepad? Open a documents window so I can write things down as needed. I should get a whiteboard to hang up behind me so I can keep it old school. But all right. Shakespeare's Sonnet 55, like all of Shakespeare's sonnets, is written in a kind of rhythm, formal fixed rhythm, known as iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter is a type of meter which is a fixed pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. And what that basically means is that when Shakespeare wrote poetry, he was thinking a lot about the rhythm of his words. In every line that Shakespeare writes, he has 10 syllables. And those syllables can be organized into pairs of unstressed and stressed syllables. In other words, you have an accent or a stress every other beat. So it's like da-da, 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 right? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And he does that 5 times per line. That's why we call it iambic pentameter. For example, in Sonnet 55, let me pick a line that's pretty regular. Here's the poem here. We'll go over it in a second. But how about this? When wasteful war shall statues overturn. This line, when wasteful war shall statues overturn. If you look at this line, one thing you'll notice is that there are 10 syllables. When 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 3 syllables in overturn. And the rough pattern of the syllables in this line is that every other syllable has a stress to it. So I'll bold the stress syllables. When wasteful war, get out of here, shall statues overturn. And what you end up with is when wasteful war shall. So the bolds are the stresses, like the beats, the accented beats, right? When wasteful war shall statues overturn. So you have 10 syllables, but 5 stress syllables, and that's where we get the penta from, because penta is the Greek word for 5, and iambic simply means that. Iambic simply means that every other syllable is stressed. That's what that means. If you're a poet, it means that anyway. So you don't have to be an expert on this meter or anything like that, but it is good to understand that poetry is a genre that is very much concerned with rhythm, and that's not just true of old poetry, right, or like Shakespeare. It's also true of the modern, the contemporary ways in which we consume poetry, mostly through popular music, right, especially hip hop, right, where the rhythm of language retains its primary importance in the artistic value of the work, of the song. So that's what's going on here in Shakespeare's Sonnet 55 in terms of the meter, right? The kind of line Shakespeare's writing. Not marble nor the gilded monuments, the princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents than unsupsown be smeared with sluggish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn, etc., etc. And it's not perfectly regular like that. When you really read the poem, you don't read it exactly as the meter dictates, right? You read it in the way it sounds sort of natural to English, but that's the sort of beat that's going in the background, kind of like a metronome in your head as you're reading. So what is Shakespeare talking about in this poem? Well, you've probably read some Shakespeare before, and you're probably used to the idea that Shakespeare is difficult because Shakespeare wrote a long time ago and his words are really old-fashioned. And that's certainly true to an extent. Now, I can't really do the poem justice in a video just lecture the way I would, I think, in a classroom. I shouldn't say things like that because it makes you feel like you're getting cheated. This is good in a different way. I mean, there's always trade-offs, online learning, in-person learning. That sort of, that being sort of in direct communion between an instructor and student is, of course, a valuable experience, but there's also something to be said for the asynchronous thing we're doing here, right? But this is actually a poem about Shakespeare's favorite subject, which is poetry. And maybe some of you got it already. Maybe some of you figured it out. Let me zoom in a little, make this bigger. That doesn't really help because of this thing. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. The poem is 14 lines, which is characteristic of all sonnets. Every sonnet is 14 lines, and that's the form of the poem. But, okay, what is he saying in these 14 lines? Let's just start with the first 4, okay? What they call the first quatrain, the first 4 lines of the sonnet. Shakespeare generally, conceptually split it, produce sonnets in 4-line chunks. So every 4 lines is like its own little unit of the poem. Not marble, I'll use my little pointer here, not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. Now, these first 2 lines really basically, what is that? Is that like that? Can you see that red circle? Is that something that my Screencastify is doing? I don't know. Anyway. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. These first 2 lines are like a touchstone for the entire poem. They pretty much decode what the entire poem is going to be about, more or less. So, not marble. Well, what is marble? I'm sure you know. Marble is a kind of stone that's very beautiful and very durable, and we associate it with works of art, right? Especially works from antiquity, right? When you think about, Greek architecture or Roman architecture, you think of marble, right? Not marble nor the gilded monuments. Gilded just means golden, right? So not marble nor the golden monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. What is he referring to when he says this powerful rhyme? That's right. He's talking about the poem, this poem that he's writing. In other words, he's saying that the poem I'm writing now will outlive marble and gold. In other words, or golden monuments, things that are meant to last, things that are meant to be timeless and to endure. I mean, think about all the marble art and architecture that survived thousands of years from ancient Athens, right? We still have it. Marble is very durable. What Shakespeare is saying here is that as durable as marble is, as durable as a golden monument is, it's not going to last as long as this poem. So clearly he's making an assertion in some ways for his own greatness, right? I'm writing something that people will read as long as people read. But also in doing so, the person that he writes about will have a kind of vessel of immortality, right? And that's what he goes on to talk about in the next two lines. But you shall shine more bright in these contents, basically, but it's pronounced with the stress on the second syllable. At least it was in the 16th century. But you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone be smeared with sluttish time. Okay, we don't know who you is. It's a mystery. There you go. Oh, look. So I'm circled the you. We don't know who you is. Yeah. Shakespeare's writing a poem to somebody or about somebody or for somebody. They're never identified. Traditionally, sonneteers write poems for women, right, or that they're in love with, or sometimes men that they're in love with. There are theories. There are about who this you is or who this sonnet is written to. It doesn't really matter. Totally irrelevant, to the point that what he's saying about this person, we can call her, right? What he's saying about this love object is that if I write about you, then you will continue to shine bright through the passing of the years, right? You will not age the way physical objects do, like unswept stone, which will be smeared with sluttish time. And sluttish means the same thing in Shakespeare's time that it does in our time. What he's basically saying is that time is something that stains or makes dirty, or time gets with everybody, right? So essentially, in these first four lines, Shakespeare is making a claim that my poem will last forever, or last longer than other kinds of commemorative objects. And in writing about you, I can make you last forever. I become the vessel for your immortality. So the first four lines are about time. And the second four lines, we have a sort of rhetorical shift of gears here. The second four lines are about war, right? War is like time in the sense that it also destroys. Time destroys slowly, and war destroys quickly. So, when wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. Without parsing every word here, I think you get the gist of it, right? Wars are destructive, right? When an army breaches the walls of a city, they'll burn everything down. All those pretty statues that you have up in the town square, right, they'll get knocked over and destroyed, right? Wasteful war shall overturn the statues and root out the work of masonry, right? Your stone, your walls that you build, your brickwork, that all can get uprooted by the destructive force of war. And in fact, topically speaking, we're right now living through a moment in which we're witnessing a lot of physical destruction, not from war, but from civil unrest. But still, it makes me think of, the protesters who took down the Confederate monuments in the past couple of days during the civil rights protests that are going on right now, right? Or the anti-police violence protests. The Daughters of the Confederacy, whatever, racist, people from early 20th century, whoever it was, put up those statues to honor the memories of their parents or their grandparents or great grandparents who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War, right? It fought for the right to keep people enslaved. And the fact that we still have those statues now is kind of ridiculous, of course, but nevertheless we do, because some people put them up so that to honor the memory of those people. Well, they're physical objects, right? They're statues, they're monuments. You can destroy them, you can take them down, they can be broken apart by violence. Is the same thing true of a poem or something written down? Not, not really, right? Um, because when you literary arts, like a poem or a story or whatever, something that's written down is transmittable, right? Its value is not in its physical essence, ink and paper, or the sort of pixels on this computer screen that have encoded the letters, right? That's not what matters. So I can burn my copy of Shakespeare, burn your copy of Shakespeare, throw my computer in the the trash compactor. It doesn't destroy the poem, right? Because the poem exists as long as the data that the writing encodes can still be transmitted and endlessly copied, right? Shakespeare lived in the age of the printing press, which transformed the way that people thought about the durability of literature. Way back in the Middle Ages, if you wanted to copy a book, you had to hire a monk to write it out by hand. And it took, days and days and days just to copy one book. All of a sudden, with printing, you can make 100 copies of something in the blink of an eye, and a poem becomes something that is very durable indeed, because it's endlessly transmittable and reproducible in a way that physical objects aren't, right? You can't photocopy a statue. You can't, you can make a copy of it like a sculpture, right? But that's an arduous task. You can't reproduce 100 of them in the blink of an eye like you can something written, right? Because again, what matters is not the physical stuff, but just the data that is encoded by that physical stuff. Pardon me, the coughing. All right. Against death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. Posterity means the generations that will come after, right? This word posterity, the coming generations, future generations. What he's basically saying is you will live in the eyes of all posterity. Anybody who reads the poetry I write about you will know about you. That wear this world out to the ending doom. And ending doom means what it sounds like, the end of the world. In other words, this will be read, and you will thus have a kind of life until the end of time, until doomsday, until the end of the world. At which point, according to Shakespeare's Christian beliefs, at the end of time, at the end of the world, all the righteous people will rise from the dead and be resurrected in the body. And then she won't need the poem anymore. Right? So till the judgment that yourself arise, until judgment day when you actually rise from the dead, you live in the poem, and dwell in lovers' eyes. All the lovers who will sit around and read sonnets to each other, you'll live in their eyes again. So, all right, that's Shakespeare's Sonnet 55. It's, that's, you could say so much more about this poem. This poem is endlessly fruitful when it comes to analysis. But the basics here are, this is a poem that Shakespeare is writing in celebration of poetry in comparison to the other forms of art. And it's really, a triumph of saying a lot with very little. Right? There's only 14 lines, only 140 syllables in the entire poem, and yet he makes a pretty compelling aesthetic philosophical argument about the durability of poetry. All right. I don't know what's going on, why I'm coughing all of a sudden. I don't think it's coronavirus. But if in my next video, I've been replaced by some other professor, it could be because I've died or been put on a ventilator or something. I don't know. I shouldn't joke about things like that. Sorry. I'm fine. I really am. No laughing matter. I know. So that's Shakespeare's Sonnet 55. And I did assign you this other poem, Marvels to His Coy Mistress. A very different kind of poem, but I think that's good. I think for now, let's just stop with the Shakespeare sonnet. Well, let me just say really briefly about Marvels to His Coy Mistress. It's a very different kind of poem. Shakespeare's poem is a poem where he's celebrating the immortality of art and how that makes how that's better than physical embodiments, right? Marvel's poem is very different. Marvel's poem is all about celebrating the body. What is it about? What is he trying to do? This is a poem about a speaker who's trying to seduce a woman, right? Trying to convince a woman to sleep with him. And, Mom, you. What can I do? I can't start the whole video over again. Just have to live with it. So I would suggest, read through Marvel's poem on your own. But basically what he's trying to do is convince her, like, we don't have much time, right? At my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. In other words, we're alive for a very short amount of time, and all we really have to look forward to is the oblivion of death. Since that is the case, let's make use of that time and, enjoy ourselves. Let's give in to the pleasures of the flesh. Let's have sex while we can, before we're dead. You might call it a kind of carpe diem poem, right? Now, therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, so let us sport us while we may. In other words, now, let's seize the moment now. This is very different than Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare's thinking about immortality and the future and preserving things through art. And Marvel's like, none of that matters because we'll be dead. Who cares? All that really matters is what we can do with the time that we have. And so a contrast in perspective, certainly. But both poems are thinking about time, certainly, right? And time, of course, is something that affects us all. That the awareness of our own mortality is a universal thing. I don't care if you lived in the 16th century, the 17th century, or if you live in the 25th century, right? It will always be the key thing for human experience, right? The awareness of one's mortality and how that makes us reflect on how we live our lives and what we appreciate in life. What's going on there? There's an intruder trying to get in here. Oh, Toby, what are you doing? I'm trying to do a video lecture. No. Work from home, eh? Well, I think on that note, I'll sign off. And you'll be hearing from me again shortly. All right? Take care, everyone. Oh, look, my other dog's here, too. Look, everybody's a big old party. Say hi, Daisy. All right. Okay. Oh, my goodness. All right. Bye-bye.